Good afternoon, everyone. The House of Sultan Chand Sons Private Limited and Method AI extend a very warm welcome to all the participants of today's data science webinar. It feels nice to have you all here once again, and we thank you for that. A bit about the house first. We are pioneers in the field of book publishing in post-independence India, catering to students from pre-primary to university level, churning out over 600 regular titles besides adding new ones to our stable year after year. Known for competently written, elegantly produced, and reasonably priced books, our publications are widely prescribed in reputed schools and colleges across the nation, as well as in neighboring countries also. Our authors are distinguished academicians, professors, and educationists with vast experience and expertise. We are proud to be associated with them. I now introduce you to the host of today's webinar, Dr. Sachin Gupta. Besides being the author of 2 data science books for classes 9th and 10th, he is also Dean, Academics and Research and Professor in the Department of Computer Science Engineering at MVN for the past 7 years. He has also been HOD Computer Science Engineering and MCA Department in Dronacharya Group of Institutions, Deputy Director and Head of the Computer Science Department in Chandraprabhu Jain College of Higher Studies, affiliated to GGSIPU, Delhi. With a teaching experience of over 20 years, which includes teaching undergraduate and postgraduate students and researchers, Dr. Gupta's academic pursuits have been fairly meritorious, winning him several awards, distinctions, scholarships, including the Certificate of Academic Excellence by GGSIPU. Dr. Gupta has also contributed to various journals, conferences, and books for schools and higher education, both nationally and internationally. His achievements are commendable. May I now request the man himself to take you through today's session, Dr. Sachin Gupta. Have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Malik sir. Thanks for having me. So, welcome. There has been a long-standing series of sessions on data science in general so far that we have covered a lot of ground, and in the same series I'm going to cover today a very important topic in data science that we actually, most of the time we actually forget to include this. So this is about avoiding bias in data science, and we shall actually learn about what is the basic, because bias is something that is ambiguous. In the terms of AI and ML, you would be using the term a very lot of times, but in the terms of data science, this is more about statistical bias than any other thing. Okay. Just give me a minute. Let me set up my machine again for sound. All right. So we will be discussing partiality, preference, and prejudice as the 3 Ps. Then we'll be discussing, can human bias affect the completely automated process of AI and ML. In fact, it should not be affected because there is no human intervention at all. And eventually we are going to discuss the way bias is affected in statistics, and then we can move on to summary and questions for the session. So we'll start with a very small video on most people believe they are absolutely fair, non-judgmental, and unbiased. So we'll start with a very small video on visual illusion. Watch it.
Want to catch your brain making a mistake in real time? Take a look at this checkerboard, created by vision scientist Edward Adelson. The squares labeled A and B are exactly the same shade of gray. Don't believe me? I don't blame you, I see them as different too. But here's the proof. Simply connect the two with this gray bar, and voila. Suddenly it's obvious. A and B are identical. Here's the strange thing. Remove the bar, and the illusion comes back immediately, just as strong as it was before. We can do this again for the skeptics. Different shades of gray, same shades of gray. Different, same. Our eyes can see that A and B are identical, but our brains fall for it every time, no matter how often you debunk the illusion. Why? Professor Adelson points to two specific details. First, contrast. A looks darker because it's surrounded by lighter colored squares. The opposite is true for B. Second, take a look at the soft edges of this darker section. Our brains see this and think, it's a shadow. We know that objects in shadows look darker than they actually are. So our brains compensate for that by making us actually see B as lighter. Something else to consider. We all know what a checkerboard pattern looks like. So we come into this illusion already expecting A and B to be different. And that could influence what we see. What about expectations we have about people? Which face is darker, the one on the left or the one on the right? Psychologists Daniel Levin and Mahzarin Banaji found that most people, including Mahzarin herself, see the black face as darker than the white face, even though the two faces are the exact same shade of gray. Again, debunking the illusion is simple. Here's an idea from Dan.
Just cover up the lower parts of the faces. You'll be left with two foreheads and they'll look exactly the same.
The features of the face matter. But in a second study, the researchers showed that you could create this illusion using the same face. People saw a racially ambiguous face labeled black as darker than the same face labeled white. Did you? Think about what this means. We see two faces. They are identical. But we're so used to associating different races with different skin tones that we misperceive a simple physical reality, all because of a single word. That's how powerful our expectations are. Now, when it comes to judging the brightness of objects, the errors seem pretty harmless. But research shows that we also see the exact same action as being less bad if the perpetrator is attractive. We rate the same musician as more masterful if she's described as a natural rather than a hard worker. These illusions are more costly. So what are things we can do to base our decisions in fact rather than fiction? Think back to how we debunked illusions before. We needed to have the two tiles, the two faces, in front of us at the same time to really prove the truth. So when you have multiple options in front of you, whether it's job candidates or health insurance plans, consider them side by side. Not only does this let you test your intuitions, research shows that you'll be more likely to. When people evaluate things together, they're more likely to use the same specific benchmarks to compare them. Want some?
Okay, so that was a basic video on how strong our brain is. How strong has it been trained since the time we were born to the stimulus that it received all throughout the years. And it actually is, it can defy all the other five senses. It can defy the sense of touch, it can defy the sense of smell, it can defy the sense of sight. It can defy everything. That powerful is the organ that we have, it's called, which is brain. So it is about from the human brain where the bias actually originates. That we usually divide bias into the three P's. In general, we call them preferences. But when we talk of bias in a positive sense, this is usually called partiality. And whenever we are using bias in a negative connotation, it is usually called a prejudice. There is also a difference between by prejudice and partiality. Prejudice is defined as a preconceived and unreasonable feeling. I mean, I might not like some religion or some group or on the basis of race or any other parameter without even having to experience that how is it like to be with them. Well, that is something that we call as prejudice. But partiality would be usually based on some experience that we have had or some comparison that we have had. This is to that extent that the bias is available that people actually can distinguish between the love of the parents. I might like my mother more than my father, or the other way. Even between the kids, you might actually like one kid more than the other. That is true for human relationship. But ideally, they should not be actually that way. So if both are the same set of people that who actually gave birth to you, there should be no bias actually, but that still creeps in based on our experience, based on our interactions with them, based on a lot of factors which our brain gets keep recording in the storage for all the time to come. Now, human bias is something that would always spill over to statistical bias because it's we who are the ones collecting data, and the statistical problem solving is completely based on human beings. So we actually are the ones who formulate statistical investigative questions. We are the ones who have to collect and consider the data. We are the ones who analyze the data. We are the ones who interpret the data. Or somebody may actually raise a question there that it can be automated. It can be completely automated for the three phases. The collection of data can be completely automated through AI. The analysis and the interpretation of data can also be completely compensated by the artificial intelligence. But this remains that what is the question on which we have to begin. So this is something which is so far not have been outsourced to AI to ask what intelligent question it should be asking. So that part is something that AI has not been allocated to yet. But each of these phases of a statistical problem solving phase that we actually discussed in a few lectures back, that bias may affect. So I may create a question which is basically biased in some form, that I might actually create a question which favors some one outcome over the other already. Then while collecting or considering the data, I may choose the samples from the population which are as per my preference. Maybe let us say I want to sample some people for food choices, and because I am inclined towards non-vegetarian, so I might actually look for all those people who are having non-vegetarian choices. That may be my sampling from the population. Then analysis of the data can actually be reflecting personal bias with the way some analysis is being done. And even we may be interpreting the results to fit what we want to believe. We may be actually creating results which actually coincide with what are the beliefs that we have had all through the thing. So that is the way bias may affect any or each of these phases, or maybe all of them altogether. Right. So the one question that we actually discussed here earlier was that is it feasible that the statistical bias may actually corrupt even computer science, artificial intelligence? So let us see how the complete process works. So between data science and artificial intelligence, there is a huge relationship. That means AI is usually considered to create some value from data. All artificial intelligence feeds on data. That means be it image-based model, be it text-based model, be it NLP, be it computer vision, be it any kind of artificial intelligence, that feeds with data. So for text instance, if I want to build a large language model, I would have to feed it a data of a lot of sentences, words, phrases in that language. If I want to build a computer vision model, I might have to actually build a lot of image of that category. Maybe if I have to ask it to recognize numbers, I feed it a lot of handwritten or printed numbers and characters. And that data is actually one which leads to statistics. We can actually collect or select data, we analyze, we interpret. But in general, whatever data collection that we have, that is going to be the one input phase to artificial intelligence. So from the artificial intelligence, we again see a clear divide between the two parts here. One part is the data science, the other part is the modeling. So data science in artificial intelligence actually is applicable to make sure that we explore what is the kind of data we have got. We clean the data, we normalize the data, we do some feature engineering, we make the data good to be actually fed to the artificial intelligence modeling phase. So from raw data, the data science allows us to actually make the data good for consumption for any computer-based model. So from the data collection where there was possible bias to now data science, but the bias has not been removed. It's just only that we are cleaning the data, exploring, normalizing, doing some feature engineering, not removing the bias if there was any. Then it goes to the modeling phase where you actually do a model selection, train, tune and evaluate the model, effectively leading to some value, and you may deploy the model, keep on monitoring it and keep on retuning or retraining the model. So the essence of this slide is that any process, be it statistic, be it data science, be it artificial intelligence, all of them have got one single root. That root is called data. And if we as humans are responsible for any data, then whatever inherent bias that we have would always spill over to all of these processes without doubt. If there are any questions during the presentation, I would look forward for them to be shared on the chat box so that I can see them. Okay. So from the previous slides, we have a takeaway that the sanctity of data that we are using in the experiment is crucial. But if my experiment would be, yeah. Okay. So my experiment would be only as successful as the data it is getting. So there's a very common principle which we speak of in an artificial intelligence that says garbage in, garbage out. The same is true for machine learning. The same is true for data science. So not for data science. Actually, data science is the one which actually takes garbage in and produces clean data, which is possibly fed to the artificial intelligence models. So what is that kind of data we are using is very crucial. And we have to monitor and mitigate bias in every stage of the statistical problem solving. There is no single way to actually avoid bias. The only simple way to avoid bias is to first recognize that there is a bias, to understand that there may be possible bias, there is a possibility that we are not perfect, the kind of data we are using might be actually affected with bias. So understanding bias, accepting, being aware of it, that is the first and the most important part of working with bias in data science. So we would be broadly dividing bias into 5 different categories, which include selection bias, there is linearity, confirmation bias, recall, and survivor bias. I'll discuss some of them today. And we'll start with the selection bias. So a very simple example that we have illustrated here is that the population is, suppose we have a school and there are students of all the classes starting from class 1 up to class 12. And let us say we are organizing a fete activity or a day of fun event. And we ask the students about the preferences they would like to have or the stalls they would like to have on the school campus. If we are selecting 25% of this population, let us say that all the students of class 9, 10, 10th, 11th and 12th are actually chosen to ask the opinion about what stalls should be there, then we are going to miss out any activities for the students of class 1, 2 and 3 and 4 because these students are grown up. They will not be actually looking forward to the activities with the junior students too. So here the sample that we have chosen is actually trouble. So the selection bias, the selected sample is not a good representation of the population. Their choices may be actually troublesome. Similarly, when I spoken about vegetarian versus non-vegetarian, so if I have to create a menu for a party and I select only the non-vegetarian people out of the entire pool of population, then my sample would be obviously biased towards non-vegetarian food choices, and that actually would be again an example of selection bias. So this is the first category of bias that we can actually encounter in a day-to-day life. The second bias that we usually face is the linearity bias. Linearity bias says that we humans see everything in the terms of two quantities which are directly proportional to each other. So let us say time and distance. I would be able to travel 10 kilometers in 1 hour, so it would be 20 kilometers in 2 hours. That is the kind of linearity that we actually think about. So yeah, if a person has earned 10 lakh rupees in a year, then the next year he would be earning 20 lakh. So that kind of is a linear. Yeah. Is there some question? Okay. So there is a curve that is related to learning and retaining information. This forgetting curve actually talks about that how much of what we learn can we recall after a period of time. So within the first 2 hours, we immediately, or within the first hour, we immediately recall the information. After 20 minutes, we can recall 60% of the information that we actually remember. And after 1 hour, we retain only 50% of the information roughly. But as the days keep lapsing, we can actually be reduced to only 20% of the information after 7 days. So, as according to the linearity bias, if that had been true, then if in 1 hour we were losing half of the information that we remembered, so we would have to completely forget everything within 2 hours. But that's not how it happens. So there is something that there was a quote that the more we learn, the more we forget, and something like that. So this forgetting curve is actually a contrary statement to that. That it's not exactly true, because what we feel as humans, that if we are learning something, then we would be forgetting it in a linear fashion. That does not happen. Similarly, there is another example that talks about, would it be preferable to buy one pizza of 12 inches or two pizzas of 8 inches? I see there is somebody in the audience who can answer that. Okay. Reena, can I ask you this question? You can send your answer on a chat box, or you can actually pick.
Okay.
What would you prefer? One pizza of 12 inches or two pizza of 8 inches each?
Depending on the number of people. If I'm alone, then I prefer one pizza with 12 inches. If there are 2 or 3, then two pizza with 8 inches.
If you have to eat more, would you prefer two pizzas of 8 inches or one pizza of 12 inch?
It may depend on the situation.
I'm just saying, if the situation is you want to eat more.
Okay.
You are hungry. You are very hungry. You want two pizzas of 8 inches, or you want one pizza of 12 inches?
Then one pizza with 12 inches.
Exactly. So if you would give this question to somebody who does not understand data science, or who does not understand the area of a pizza from this curve, they would see that two pizzas of 8 inches are better. They would think that it's the size is only this much small, that and a 12-inch pizza would be. But see, the size of a 8-inch pizza, or the area of a 8-inch pizza, is almost close to 200 square meter or square centimeter. But for a 12-inch pizza, it's 452. That means combining these two together would be only 400, and this is actually 452 units in the area of a square. So that is again the principle of linearity, that most people who do not understand data science, they would feel that as I am having two pizzas of 8 inches each, that might be more in the size, but area of a pizza would be more if the diameter is bigger. for even a single piece. Okay, so that's about the linearity. We'll talk about a cognitive bias again. I want you to see a video and you would actually love the end of it.
I'm going to give you guys three numbers, a three-number sequence, and I have a rule in mind that these three numbers obey. And I want you to try to figure out what that rule is. But the way that you can get information is by proposing your own set of three numbers to which I will say, yes, that follows my rule, or no, it doesn't follow my rule, and then you can propose what you think the rule is. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so here are the three numbers. 2, 4, 8.
2, 4, 8.
You don't need to continue the sequence, you can propose a totally different sequence, whatever you want to propose.
Okay, in the meanwhile, you can also think in your mind what would be the sequence along with this, that what would have been the thinking of this person's sequence.
And I will simply say yes or no, that follows my rule.
2, 4, 8. 16, 32.
16, 32, and
64.
those also follow my rule.
Okay.
What's the rule? What are you thinking?
Multiply by 2.
That is not my rule.
What?
That's not my rule. But you're allowed, if you want, propose three other numbers.
3, 6, 12.
3, 6, 12.
3, 6, 12 follows my rule.
10, 20, 40.
10, 20, 40.
That follows the rule.
Yeah, I'm still multiplying by 2.
I know.
Ah.
I know what you're doing. And yes, it follows my rule, but no, it's not my rule.
5, 10,
10 and 20.
Follows my rule.
100,
200, 400.
Follows my rule.
500, 1,000, 2,000.
Follows my rule.
Want me to keep going?
But do I just keep going? You're going to tell me your rule?
Am I doing it the wrong way? Am I approaching this the wrong way?
You're totally fine,
Okay.
but you're approaching it the way most people approach it. Like, think strategically about this. You want information.
Yeah.
I have information. The point of the three numbers, right, is to allow you to figure out what the rule is.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to give you the numbers that I don't think fits the sequence and then see what you say. So I'll say 2, 4, 7.
Fits my rule.
So whatever I propose is right?
So is your rule like you can propose any number?
So the rule is anything we say is yes.
No.
Damn it.
But you are on the right track now. Hit me with three numbers.
3, 6, 9.
Follows my rule.
Oh, that didn't follow my rule.
This is good, right?
5, 10, 15.
That follows my rule.
What? Oh. Really?
Yeah.
I don't believe this.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Follows the rule.
What about 7, 8, 9?
Follows. Yes, that follows the rule.
8, 16, 39.
Fits the rule.
Excellent.
But we're no closer to the rule. I want you to get to the rule. How about 1, 7, 13?
Okay, so I hope I have two participants more who are. Can one of you tell me what might have been the rule? Right? What is your thought on what might be possibly the rule of numbers? What was the rule that he was following? He said it's not multiplication by 2. Should we go and complete the video or?
बात हो गया मैडम से
Deshpande, what would you say? What might be possibly the rule that they are following?
In one case, I felt it could be double minus 1.
Okay. See, all right. That was basically simply a following the rule of increasing numbers, nothing more.
Nothing.
Numbers.
Okay.
This was actually the kind of bias that we are used to looking at series in a reasoning way. We always wanted to actually match some pattern. We always try to find something that would satisfy that, yes, I applied my intellect and I found the pattern between the numbers that was. So this is usually the way our brain is wired, because this is how we have been learning. So that was a cognitive bias. That was something that my brain is wired to do every time. And in fact, the confirmation bias is exploited by most of the social media in the form of algorithms. Like Google would recommend you advertisements and links based on your browsing history. In fact, this is something that it might be listening into our conversation, and you may get links on the basis of what you are speaking. Facebook has been accused of helping Cambridge Analytica to use confirmation bias for political vote consolidation, not only in India, in several other countries as well. And Instagram always shows you reels based on the one which you spend more time on. Same for YouTube. So my choice of music on YouTube would be dependent upon the algorithm, which is actually just making sure that it understands what I am usually searching, and it keeps on exploiting that confirmation bias all and over and over and on. Right. So all recommendation systems actually exploit this kind of scenario. The third category is survivor bias. So survivor bias, I have a very, very, very good example. And since my daughter is in class 12, it is a very relevant thing also. Survivor bias says that only the cases reflecting survivors or success stories are chosen while ignoring the failure cases. That leads to bias sample. So most people who try to look into that what would be the career after class 12 time, they look at FITGI proposes AIR1, AIR2, AIR3, all India ranks are to FITGI. Then Alan says next year that these are the all India ranks that we have gotten. Every coaching institute talks about the all India ranks. The only thing that they do not tell is that what is the total enrollment they have. So they show us a very small sample of all those who are the leaders or winners and only the success stories, but they do not tell us what is the complete population from which this sample is chosen. This is a survivorship bias. So we need to bias sample, even if this is true for the stock market. So most of the people make losses, but only a few who are actually getting a good amount of returns from the stock market. They are the ones seen as that they show that the stock market is very good. So same went for crypto, any gambling, all of that are examples of survivor bias. We want to see the cases of success stories most of the time. Then it's not that the bias is only limited to these. There is the whole catalog, and you would be surprised to see that how many types of biases may actually be there in the world. So there are a list of so many different kind of biases. Check out admission rate, all the literature, allocation, apprehension. There are almost close to over 100 biases in the list. And we are just scratching the surface that when we are talking about a limited number of biases. So there may be a lot more than we've discussed. Okay. So how fast or how far the implications are, check out how our brain actually leads us into believing something that we always want to believe. Just have a last video of the day.
Psychologist Alexander Todorov has discovered the mathematics underlying our first impressions. Using data he's collected from thousands of people at Princeton University, Dr. Todorov has built a computer program that can pinpoint the very parts of a face that trigger our gut instincts. That is, whether someone looks aggressive, introverted, attractive, and so on. See for yourself. As quickly as you can, answer this question. Which of these two people is more trustworthy?
Okay, the question is, which of these two people is more trustworthy? And may I have the answer from any of you?
By the image, most of them would go with B.
All right. Keep going.
Trustworthy, A or B? And what about from this pair? And this one? This probably wasn't. Here's Dr. Todorov.
You don't need more than 160 to 100 milliseconds to get pretty much the same first impression you will get from unlimited time.
This was Dr. Todorov's first finding, that first impressions are fast. The second finding is perhaps even more surprising. Almost everyone sees the same thing. Consider the faces you just saw. If you're like the majority of people in Dr. Todorov's studies, these are the ones you chose as being more trustworthy. And what about competence? Just look at this face created by Dr. Todorov's software. The changes to this face are small. The tilt of the mouth, the size of the brow, the distance between the eyes. And yet, taken together, these features trigger a judgment. If we're honest, we'll admit that this face seems to be gaining and losing IQ points right in front of our very eyes. We're all familiar with sayings like, don't judge a book by its cover. But we do. And Dr. Todorov's studies show this too.
We did some studies presenting participants' faces of politicians, and it turns out that using judgments of naive participants, we can predict about 70% of the electoral outcomes. In a nutshell, politicians who happened to look more competent than their rivals were more likely to win in the elections.
These findings, which included almost every major congressional candidate for the 2004 to 2008 elections, are incredible. Campaign promises, advertisements, and experience aside, what really matters is how you look. And faces don't just sway who we elect to lead our governments. They also affect who we hire, who we give opportunities to, who we promote. Now, if everyone sees the same thing when they look at a face, it raises the question, are these impressions accurate? Do people look more competent because they actually are more competent? Do they look more trustworthy because they are more trustworthy? The short answer is no.
Often the natural...
Okay, so that was that. This is something that we learn through life, that we see baby faces, we see smiles on the faces of babies, we think that babies are innocent, and the trust is implicitly associated with a smile, like a baby smile. So that is what our mind is tricking us into whenever we see a smiling face, a slightly smiling face as compared to the other, and we feel that this is more trustworthy. That basically is the underlying gist of this video that we have seen. But there is, again, that your brain is at play, there is a bias happening even without understanding what is the person behind this face. So there have been several case studies where bias has affected computer algorithms, like there was a software called Compass, correctional offender management profiling, which was done in the United States of America for prediction of which criminal offender is likely to return to jail. I mean, after once they were caught, then they were profiling them, and the software actually indicated that this person is likely to do a crime again and come back. So this software was found heavily biased against black people, resulting in bigger penalties and higher security deposits for bail, when the system always considered white people as less risky and proposed reduced fines and punishment. So this was one classical example of how the human bias was creeping into the bias by a software. Then there is yet another case of predictive policing, where a software was created to find out that which places are more likely to witness a crime in future, that attempted to reduce bias in police forces by automating the job with AI. So the idea was that if we were leaving it to human beings, they might actually be biased. So let us outsource this to computers. It was found that the system was regularly issuing false alerts and unnecessarily sending police teams to area with more population of racial minority. This was again the reason why, because that the humans who actually fed data into this, they were biased against the racial minority, then that led to the software being troublesome. And last but not the least, this was a very, very popular case where Amazon used artificial intelligence for shortlisting resumes of potential candidate. Now, Amazon used to do what? They, in the early years, a lot of their workforce were men. So they wanted to actually bring in diversity, bring in more females on the job, because they thought that people who are actually going to select candidate, they might choose more men again, because that had been the trend. So what they did, they fed the data into their system, that what are the criteria, what are the conditions. They fed a lot of resumes. So their training data was all the thousands of resumes they have seen over the years. And then they also trained the system on what were the people who were shortlisted. So the shortlisted data was also fed. And it was to predict using that take a new CV, you have to find out whether this would be actually accepted or not. By and large, the algorithm was very simple. But the problem was that when you use the system, it was again churning out the same ratio of the males to females. That means there were a lot of males being selected and the females were not. So when it was tested, the system found out that because the data that we fed, that was highly skewed in ratio for the males. So we sent in a lot of male resumes. We sent in a lot of selected male resumes also. So it was naturally thinking that the system thought that the criteria for selection is possibly male as well. So that figured out as one feature, and that actually led to your software being in trouble. So because a far higher number of successful male applicant resumes were there for the training data, the algorithm became inherently biased against women in technology, and it had to be scrapped later. So this was some example, a very classic example of how the human bias can actually not even willingly, inadvertently creep into a system, because we had been following it for so long that it actually happened that way. Okay, so at this point, I'll look for if you have any queries about the session that we can answer. Anything at all? Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, actually, sir, like any data science of class 9, I'm handling class 9 data science. Any topic that I use, I have to bring down it to the level where the children can understand. Whether it could be ethical guidelines for data analysis. So I have to ethical guidelines for data analysis. So I have to give them a real life example where the teacher gives instruction during the exams not to copy, all those things, compare it, and then bring it to the concept of ethical guidelines for data analysis. So is there any website where I can find details of the concept of data science or data analysis with a real life example? Because at class 9 level, everything has to be brought it to their level that's happening in their surrounding, so that they understand the concept.
Yeah. Okay, ma'am. So one thing is that I am supposed to cover this in 2 weeks from now. We are definitely going to have a session on ethics in data science, because this contributes a major portion. In both class 9 and 10, there is a unit on ethics in data science. Secondly, to answer your question just right away, see, there you have to tell the students to participate in the class activities only. Within the class activity, would you tell on your friend if they have actually stolen somebody's lunch or if they have done something? So by these small examples, we can tell them what is the difference between what is ethical versus what is legal. It might not be legal to actually put a stain on somebody's shirt or tear the page of some, but it might not be ethical. Or to hide somebody's copy for a while the teacher is checking. There are a lot of things, there are a lot of ethical dilemmas that the students of class 8, 9, 10, they face in a regular day-to-day life. So we can just find examples from scenario-based, like what would you do if you were into this situation, and they can actually be a debate between two students who actually have opposing view. That's the best way. So case studies or role play are the best way of actually working it out.
But is there any like book or a website where I can find more of such cases? Because there are a lot of topics.
Ma'am, we have included a lot of examples in our book as well for data science, class 9.
Okay.
Okay. So you can write me a mail. I'll try to give you a sample for all the examples that we have. There is my mail ID. It's on sachin.gupta@methodai.com.
I'll just make a note.
Mail ID is on the screen. It's on your screen, ma'am. sachin.gupta@methodai.com or sachin.gupta@mvn.edu.in.
Sorry, sir, I did not get your ID.
This is right on your screen.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes.
Just write to me if I can help you with any other thing. It
Yes,
would be a
sir, sure.
pleasure.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I do not have any further questions. If in case we do not have, we would like to close the session for today. Thank you so much for the session, attending the session. And if there are any query that we have left unanswered, you can always write to me. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Thank you, Dr. Gupta. As always, this session too was quite informative, interesting, and engaging.
Thank you
A
so
big
much.
thank you to all those also who tuned in. To all the participants, our next data science session will take place soon, about which you'll be duly informed. Thank you. Have a great weekend ahead. Thanks.